everybody! Today the Bookworms will continue reading Matilda by Roald Dahl and illustrated by Quentin Blake. Let's begin. Chapter 13, The Weekly Test. At 2:00 sharp, the class assembled, including Miss Honey, who noted that the jug of water and the glass were in the proper place. Then she took up a position standing right at the back. Everyone waited. Suddenly in marched the gigantic figure of the headmistress in her belted smock and green breeches. "Good afternoon, children," she barked. "Good afternoon, Miss Trunchbull," they chirruped. The headmistress stood before the class, legs apart, hands on hips, glaring at the small boys and girls who sat nervously at their desks in front of her. "Not a very pretty sight," she said. Her expression was one of utter distaste, as though she was looking at something a dog had done in the middle of the floor. "What a bunch of nauseating little warts you are!" Everyone had the sense to stay silent. "Makes me vomit," she went on, "to think that I am going to have put up with a load of garbage like you in my school for the next 6 years. I can see that I'm going to have to expel as many of you as possible as soon as possible to save myself from going round the bend." She paused and snorted several times. It was a curious noise. You can hear the same sort of thing if you walk through a riding stable when the horses are being fed. "I suppose," she went on, "your mothers and fathers tell you you're wonderful. Well, I'm here to tell you the opposite, and you'd better believe me. Stand up, everybody." They all got quickly to their feet. "Now put your hands out in front of you, and as I walk past, I want you to turn them over so I can see if they are clean on both sides." The Trunchbull began a slow march along the rows of desks, inspecting the hands. All went well until she came to a small boy in the second row. "What's your name?" she barked. "Nigel," the boy said. "Nigel what?" "Nigel Hicks," the boy said. "Nigel Hicks what?" the Trunchbull bellowed. She bellowed so loudly they nearly blew the little chap out of the window. "That's it," Nigel said, "unless you want my middle names as well." He was a brave little fellow, and one could see that he was trying not to be scared by the Gorgon who towered above him. "I do not want your middle names, you blister!" the Gorgon bellowed. "What is my name?" "Miss Trunchbull," Nigel said. "Then use it when you address me." "Now then, let's try again. What is your name?" "Nigel Hicks, Miss Trunchbull," Nigel said. "That's better," the Trunchbull said. "Your hands are filthy, Nigel. When did you last wash them?" "Well, let me think," Nigel said. "That's rather difficult to remember exactly. It could have been yesterday, or it could have been the day before." The Trunchbull's whole body and face seemed to swell up as though she were being inflated by a bicycle pump. "I knew it!" she bellowed. "I knew as soon as I saw you that you were nothing but a piece of filth. What's your father's job? A sewage worker?" "He's a doctor," Nigel said, "and a jolly good one. He says we're all so covered with bugs anyway that a bit of extra dirt never hurts anyone." "I'm glad he's not my doctor," the Trunchbull said. "And why, might I ask, is there a big bean on the front of your shirt?" "We had them for lunch, Miss Trunchbull." "And you usually put your lunch on the front of your shirt, Nigel? Is that what this famous doctor father of yours has taught you to do?" "Baked beans are hard to eat, Miss Trunchbull. They keep falling off my fork." "You are disgusting," the Trunchbull bellowed. "You are a walking germ factory. I don't wish to see any more of you today. Go and stand in the corner on one leg with your face to the wall." "But Miss Trunchbull—" "Don't argue with me, boy, or I'll make you stand on your head. Now do as you're told." Nigel went. "Now stay where you are, boy, while I test you on your spelling to see if you've learned anything at all this past week. And don't run when you talk to me. Keep your nasty little face to the wall. Now then, spell right." "Which one?" Nigel asked. "The thing you do with a pen or the one that means the opposite of wrong?" He happened to be an unusually bright child, and his mother had worked hard with him at home on spelling and reading. "The one with the pen, you little fool!" Nigel spelled it correctly, which surprised Trunchbull. She thought she had given him a very tricky word, one that he wouldn't yet have learned, and she was peeved that he had succeeded. Then Nigel said, still balancing on one leg and facing the wall, Miss Honey taught us how to spell a new very long word yesterday. And what was that? The Trunchbull asked softly. The softer her voice became, the greater the danger. But Nigel wasn't to know this. Difficulty, Nigel said. Everyone in the class can spell difficulty now. What nonsense, the Trunchbull said. You were not supposed to learn long words like that until you are at least 8 or 9. And don't try to tell me everybody in the class can spell that word. You are lying to me, Nigel. Test someone, Nigel said, taking an awful chance. Test anyone you like. The Trunchbull's dangerous, glittering eyes roved around the classroom. You, she said, pointing at a tiny and rather daft little girl called Prudence. Spell difficulty. Amazingly, Prudence spelled it correctly and without a moment's hesitation. The Trunchbull was properly taken aback. She snorted. And I suppose Miss Honey wasted the whole of one lesson teaching you to spell that one single word. Oh, no, she didn't, piped Nigel. Miss Honey taught it to us in 3 minutes, so we'll never forget it. She teaches us lots of words in 3 minutes. And what exactly is this magic method? Asked the headmistress. I'll show you, pipped up the brave Nigel again, coming to Miss Honey's rescue. Can I put my other foot down and turn around, please, while I show you? You may do neither, snapped the Trunchbull. Stay as you are and show me just the same. All right, said Nigel, wobbling crazily on his one leg. Miss Honey gives us a little song about each word, and we all sing it together, and we learn to spell it in no time. Would you like to hear the song about difficulty? I should be fascinated, the Trunchbull said in a voice dripping with sarcasm. Here it is, Nigel said. Mrs. D, Mrs. I, Mrs. F, F, I, Mrs. C, Mrs. U, Mrs. L, T, Y. That spells difficulty. How perfectly ridiculous, snorted the Trunchbull. Why are all these women married? And anyway, you're not meant to teach poetry when you're teaching spelling. Cut it out in future, Miss Honey. But it does teach them some of the harder words wonderfully well, Miss Honey murmured. Don't argue with me, Miss Honey, the headmistress thundered. Just do as you're told. I shall now test the class on the multiplication tables to see if Miss Honey has taught you anything at all in that direction. The Trunchbull had returned to her place in front of the class, and diabolical gaze was moving slowly along the rows of tiny pupils. You! She barked, pointing at a small boy called Rupert in the front row. What is 2 7s? 16, Rupert answered with foolish abandon. The Trunchbull started advancing slow and soft-footed upon Rupert in the manner of a tigress stalking a small deer. Rupert suddenly became aware of the danger signals and quickly tried again. It's 18, he cried. 2 7s are 18, not 16. You ignorant little slug, the Trunchbull bellowed. You witless weed, you empty-headed hamster, you stupid glob of glue. She had now stationed herself directly behind Rupert, and suddenly she extended a hand the size of a tennis racket and grabbed all the hair on Rupert's head in her fist. Rupert had a lot of golden-colored hair. His mother thought it was beautiful to behold and took a delight in allowing it to grow extra long. The Trunchbull had a great dislike for long hair on boys. She had for plaits and pigtails on girls, and she was about to show it. She took a firm grip on Rupert's long golden tresses with her giant hand, and then, by raising her muscular right arm, she lifted the helpless boy clean out of his chair and held him aloft. Rupert yelled. He twisted and squirmed and kicked the air and went on yelling like a stuck pig. And Miss Trunchbull bellowed, 2 7s are 14! 2 7s are 14! I am not letting you go till you say it! From the back of the class, Miss Honey cried out, Miss Trunchbull, please let him down. You're hurting him. All his hair might come out. And well, it might be if he doesn't stop wriggling, snorted the Trunchbull. Keep still, you squirming worm. It was really quite an extraordinary sight to see this giant headmistress dangling the small boy high in the air, and the boy spinning and twisting like something on the end of a string and shrieking his head off. Say it! Bellowed the Trunchbull. Say 2 7s are 14. Hurry up or I'll start jerking you up and down, and then your hair will really come out and we'll have enough of it to stuff a sofa. Get on with it, boy. Say 2 7s are 14, and I'll let you go. 2 7s are 14, gasped Rupert. Whereupon the Trunchbull, true to her word, opened her hand and quite literally let him go. He was a long way off the ground when she released him, and he plummeted to earth and hit the floor and bounced like a football. Get up and stop whimpering, the Trunchbull barked. Rupert got up and went back to his desk, massaging his scalp with both hands. The Trunchbull returned to the front of the class. The children sat there hypnotized. None of them had seen quite anything like this before. It was splendid entertainment. It was better than a pantomime, with one big difference. In this room, there was an enormous human bomb in front of them which was liable to explode and blow someone to bits any moment. The children's eyes were riveted on the headmistress. I don't like small people, she was saying. Small people should never be seen by anybody. They should be kept out of sight in boxes like hairpins and buttons. I cannot for the life of me see why children have to take so long to grow up. I think they do it on purpose. Another extremely brave little boy in the front row spoke up and said, But surely you were a small person once, Miss Trunchbull, weren't you? I was never a small person, she snapped. I have been large all my life, and I don't see why others can't be the same way. But you must have started out as a baby, the boy said. Nay, a baby, shouted the Trunchbull. How dare you suggest such a thing? What cheek! What infernal insolence! What's your name, boy? And stand up when you speak to me. The boy stood up. My name is Eric Ink, Miss Trunchbull, he said. Eric what? The Trunchbull shouted. Ink, the boy said. Don't be an ass, boy. There's no such name. Look in the phone book, Eric said. You'll see my father there under Ink. Very well then, the Trunchbull said. You may be Ink, young man, but let me tell you something. You're not indelible. I'll very soon rub you out if you try getting clever with me. Spell what? I don't understand, Eric said. What do you want me to spell? Spell what, you idiot? Spell the word what? W-O-T, Eric said, answering too quickly. There was a nasty silence. I'll give you one more chance, the Trunchbull said, not moving. Ah, yes, I know, Eric said. It's got an H in it. W-H-O-T. It's easy. In 2 large strides, the Trunchbull was behind Eric's desk, and there stood a pillar of doom towering over the helpless boy. Eric glanced fearfully back over his shoulder at the monster. I was right, wasn't I? He murmured nervously. You were wrong, the Trunchbull barked. In fact, you strike me as a sort of poisonous-like pockmark that will always be wrong. You sit wrong, you look wrong, you speak wrong, you are wrong all around. I will give you one more chance to be right. Spell what? Eric hesitated. Then he said very slowly, It's not W-O-T, and it's not W-H-O-T. Ah, I know. It must be W-H-O-T-T. Standing behind Eric, the Trunchbull reached out and took hold of the boy's 2 ears, one with each hand, pinching them between forefinger and thumb. Ow! Eric cried. Ow, you're hurting me! I haven't started yet, the Trunchbull said briskly. And now, taking a firm grip on his 2 ears, she lifted him bodily out of his seat and held him aloft, like Rupert before him. Eric squealed the house down. From the back of the classroom, Miss Honey cried out, Miss Trunchbull, don't! Please let him go. His ears might come off. They'll never come off, the Trunchbull shouted back. I've discovered through long experience, Miss Honey, that the ears of small boys are stuck very firmly to their heads. Let him go, Miss Trunchbull, please, begged Miss Honey. You could damage him, you really could. You could wrench the thing right off. Ears never come off, the Trunchbull shouted. They stretch most marvelously like these are doing now, but I can assure you they never come off. Eric was squealing louder than ever and pedaling the air with his legs. Matilda had never before seen a boy, or anyone else for that matter, held aloft by either his ears alone. Like Miss Honey, she felt sure both ears were going to come off at any moment with all the weight that was on them. The Trunchbull was shouting, The word what is spelled W-H-A-T. Now spell it, you little wart. Eric didn't hesitate. He had learned from watching Rupert a few minutes before that the quicker you answered, the quicker you were released. "W-H-A-T, he squealed. "Spells what?" Still holding him by the ears, the Trunchbull lowered him back into his chair behind his desk. Then she marched back to the front of the class, dusting off her hands, one against the other like someone who has been handling something rather grimy. "That's the way to make them learn, Miss Honey," she said. "You take it from me. It's no good just telling them. You've got to hammer it into them. There's nothing like a little twisting and twiddling to encourage them to remember things. It concentrates their minds wonderfully." "You could do them permanent damage, Miss Trunchbull," Miss Honey cried out. "Oh, I have. I'm quite sure I have," the Trunchbull answered, grinning. "Eric's ears will have stretched quite considerably in the last couple of minutes. They'll be much longer now than they were before. There's nothing wrong with that, Miss Honey. It'll give him an interesting pixie look for the rest of his life." "But Miss Trunchbull—" "Oh, do shut up, Miss Honey. You're as wet as any of them. If you can't cope in here, then you could go and find a job in some cotton wool private school for rich brats. When you have been teaching for as long as I have, you realize that it's no good at all being kind to children. Read Nicholas Nickleby, Miss Honey, by Mr. Dickens. Read about Mr. Walkfoot Squeers, the admirable headmaster of Dotheby Hall. He knew how to handle the little brutes, didn't he? He knew how to use the birch, didn't he? He kept their backsides so warm you have fried eggs and bacon on them. A fine book, that. But I don't suppose this bunch of morons we've got here will ever read it because of how they look of them. They are never going to learn to read anything." "I've read it," Matilda said quietly. The Trunchbull flicked her head round and looked carefully at the small girl, with the dark hair and deep brown eyes sitting in the second row. "What did you say?" she asked sharply. "I said I've read it, Miss Trunchbull." "Read what?" "Nicholas Nickleby, Miss Trunchbull." "You were lied to me, madam," the Trunchbull shouted, glaring at Matilda. "I doubt there's a single child in the entire school who has read that book. And here you are, an unhatched shrimp sitting in the lowest form there is, trying to tell me a whopping great lie like that. Why did you do it? You must take me for a fool. You take me for a fool, child." "Well," Matilda said. Then she hesitated. She would like to have said, "Yes, I jolly well do," but that would have been a suicide. "Well," she said again, still hesitating, still refusing to say no. The Trunchbull sensed what the child was thinking, and she didn't like it. "Stand up when you speak to me," she snapped. "What is your name?" Matilda stood up and said, "My name is Matilda Wormwood, Miss Trunchbull." "Wormwood, is it?" the Trunchbull said. "In that case, you must be the daughter of that man who owns Wormwood Motors." "Yes, Miss Trunchbull." "He's a crook!" the Trunchbull shouted. "A week ago he sold me a second-hand car that he was almost new. I thought he was a splendid fellow then. But this morning when I was driving the car, though, the entire engine fell out onto the road. The whole thing was filled with sawdust. The man's a thief and a robber. I'll have his skin for sausages, you see, if I don't." "He's clever at his business," Matilda said. "Clever my foot!" the Trunchbull shouted. "Miss Honey tells me that you are meant to be clever too." "Well, madam, I don't like clever people. They are all crooked. You are most certainly crooked. Before I fell out with your father, he told me some very nasty stories about the way you behaved at home. But you'd better not try anything in this school, young lady. I shall be keeping a very careful eye on you from now on. Sit down and keep quiet." Chapter 14. The First Miracle. Matilda sat down again at her desk. The Trunchbull seated herself behind the teacher's table. It was the first time she had sat down during the lesson. Then she reached out a hand and took hold of her water jug. Still holding the jug by the handle, but not lifting it yet, she said, "I have never been able to understand why small children are so disgusting. They are the bane of my life. They are like insects. They should be got rid of as early as possible. We get rid of flies with fly spray, and by hanging up fly paper. I have often thought about inventing a spray for getting rid of small children. How splendid it would be to walk into this classroom with a gigantic spray gun in my hands and start pumping it. Or better still, some huge strips of sticky paper. I would hang them all around the school and you'd all get stuck to them, and that would be the end of it. Wouldn't that be a good idea, Miss Honey?" "If it's meant to be a joke, headmistress, I don't think it's a very funny one, Miss Honey said from the back of the class. You wouldn't, would you, Miss Honey? The Trunchbull said. And it's not meant to be a joke. My idea of a perfect school, Miss Honey, is one that has no children in it at all. One of these days I shall start up a school like that. I think it will be very successful. The woman's mad, Miss Honey was telling herself. She's round the twist. She's the one who ought to be got rid of. The Trunchbull now lifted the large blue porcelain water jug and poured some water into her glass. And suddenly with the water out came the long slimy newt, straight into the glass. Plop! The Trunchbull let out a yell and leaped off her chair, as though a firecracker had gone underneath her. And now the children also saw the long, thin, slimy, yellow-belied lizard-like creature twisting and turning in the glass. And they squirmed and jumped about as well, shouting, What is it? Oh, it's disgusting! It's a snake! It's a baby crocodile! It's an alligator! Look out, Miss Trunchbull! Cried Lavender. I'll bet it bites! The Trunchbull, this mighty female giant, stood there in her green breeches, quivering like Beaumage. She was especially furious that someone had succeeded in making her jump and yell like that, because she prided herself on her toughness. She stared at the creature twisting and wriggling in the glass. Curiously enough, she had never seen a newt before. Natural history was not her strong point. She hadn't the faintest idea what this thing was. It certainly looked like an extremely unpleasant. Slowly, she sat down again in her chair. She looked at this moment more terrifying than ever before. The fires of fury and hatred were smoldering in her small black eyes. Matilda! She barked. Stand up! Who, me? Matilda said. What have I done? Stand up, you disgusting little cockroach! I haven't done anything, Miss Trunchbull. Honestly, I haven't. I've never seen that slimy thing before. Stand up at once, you filthy little maggot! Reluctantly, Matilda got to her feet. She was in the second row. Lavender was in the row behind her, feeling a bit guilty. She hadn't intended to get her friend into trouble. On the other hand, she was certainly not about to own up. You are a vile, repulsive, repellent, malicious little brute, the Trunchbull was shouting. You are not fit to be in this school. You ought to be behind bars. That's where you ought to be. I shall have you drummed out of this establishment in utter disgrace. I shall have the prefects chase you down the corridor and out of the front door with hockey sticks. I shall have the staff escort you home under armed guard. And then I shall make absolutely sure you are sent to reformatory for delinquent girls for this minimum of 40 years. The Trunchbull was in such a rage that her face had taken on a boiled color and little flecks of froth were gathering at the corner of her mouth. But she was not the only one who was losing her cool. Matilda was also beginning to see red. She didn't in the least mind being accused of having done something she hadn't actually done. She could see the justice of that. It was, however, a totally new experience for her to be accused of a crime that she definitely had not committed. She had absolutely nothing to do with that beastly creature in the glass. By golly, she thought, that rotten Trunchbull isn't going to pin this one on me. I did not do it, she screamed. Oh, yes, you did, the Trunchbull roared back. Nobody else could have thought up a trick like that. Your father was right to warn me about you. The woman seemed to have lost control of herself completely. She was ranting like a maniac. You are finished in this school, young lady, she shouted. You are finished everywhere. I shall personally see it to you that you are put away in a place where not even the crows can land their droppings on you. You will probably never see the light of my day again. I'm telling you, I did not do it, Matilda screamed. I've never seen a creature like that in my life. You have put a crocodile in my drink water, the Trunchbull yelled back. There is no worse crime in the world against the headmistress. Now sit down and don't say a word. Go on, sit down at once. But I'm telling you, Matilda shouted, refusing to sit down. I'm telling you to shut up, the Trunchbull roared. If you don't shut up at once and sit down, I shall remove my belt and let you have it with the end that has the buckle. Slowly, Matilda sat down. Oh, the rottenness of it all! The unfairness! How dare they expel her for something she hadn't done? Matilda felt herself getting angrier and angrier and angrier, so unbearably angry that something was bound to explode inside her very soon. The newt was still squirming in the tall glass of water. It looked horribly uncomfortable. The glass was not big enough for it. Matilda glared at the Trunchbull. How she hated her! She glared at the glass with the newt in it. She longed to march up and grab the glass and tip the contents, newt and all over the Trunchbull's head. She trembled to think what the Trunchbull would do to her if she did that. The Trunchbull was sitting behind the teacher's table, staring with a mixture of horror and fascination at the newt wriggling in the glass. Matilda's eyes were also riveted on the glass, and now, quite slowly, there began to creep over Matilda a most extraordinary and peculiar feeling. The feeling was mostly in the eyes. A kind of electricity seemed to be gathering inside them. A sense of power was brewing in those eyes of hers. A feeling of great strength was settling itself deep inside her eyes. But there was also another feeling, which was something else together, and which she could not understand. It was like flashes or lightning. Little waves of lightning seemed to be flashing out of her eyes. Her eyeballs were beginning to get hot, as though vast energy was building up somewhere inside them. It was an amazing sensation. She kept her eyes steadily on the glass, and now the power was concentrating itself in one small part of each eye, and growing stronger and stronger, and it felt as though a million of tiny little invisible arms with hands on them were shooting out of her eyes towards the glass she was staring at. "Tip it," Matilda whispered. "Tip it over." She saw the glass wobble. It actually tilted backwards, a fraction of an inch, then righted itself again. She kept pushing at it with all those millions of invisible little arms and hands that were reaching out from her eyes, feeling the power that was flashing straight from the two little black dots in the very centers of her eyeballs. "Tip it," she whispered again. "Tip it over." Once more, the glass wobbled. She pushed harder, still, willing her eyes to shoot out more power. And then very, very slowly, so slowly she could hardly see it happening, the glass began to lean backwards, farther and farther and farther backwards, until it was balancing on just one edge of its base. And there it teetered for a few seconds before finally toppling over and falling with a sharp tinkle onto the desktop. The water in it and the squirming newt splashed out all over Mrs. Trunchbull's enormous bosom. The headmistresses let out a yell that must have rattled every window pane in the building, and for the second time in the last 5 minutes, she shot out of her chair like a rocket. The newt clutched desperately at the cotton smock where it covered the great chest, and there it plunged with its little claw-licked feet. The Trunchbull looked down and saw it, and she bellowed even louder, and with a swipe of her hand, she sent the creature flying across the classroom. It landed on the floor, beside Lavender's desk, and very quickly she ducked down and picked it up and put it into her pencil box for another time. A newt, she decided, was a useful thing to have around. The Trunchbull, her face more like a boiled hen than ever, was standing before the class, quivering with fury. Her massive bosom was heaving in and out, and the splash of water down the front of it made a dark, wet patch that probably soaked right through to her skin. "Who did it?" she roared. "Come on! Own up! Step forward! You won't escape this time! Who is responsible for this dirty job? Who pushed over this glass?" Nobody answered. The whole room remained silent as a tomb. "Matilda!" she roared. "It was you! I know it was you!" Matilda in the second row sat very still and said nothing. A strange feeling of serenity and confidence was sweeping over her, and all of a sudden she found that she was frightening by nobody in the world. With the power of her eyes alone, she had compelled a glass of water to tip and spill its contents over the horrible headmistress, and anybody who could do that could do anything. "Speak up, you clotted carbuncle!" roared the Trunchbull. "Admit you did it!" Matilda looked right back into the flashing eyes of this infuriated female giant and said with a total calmness, "I have not moved away from my desk, Miss Trunchbull, since the lesson began. I can say no more." Suddenly the entire class seemed to rise up against the headmistress. "She didn't move," they cried out. "Matilda didn't move! Nobody moved! You must have knocked it over yourself!" "I most certainly did not knock it over myself!" roared the Trunchbull.
How dare you suggest such a thing like that? Speak up, Miss Honey. You must have seen everything. Who knocked over my glass?
None of the children did, Miss Trunchbull, Miss Honey answered. I can vouch for it that nobody has moved from his or her desk all the time you've been here, except for Nigel, and he has not moved from his corner.
Miss Trunchbull glared at Miss Honey. Miss Honey met her gaze without flinching.
I'm telling you the truth, headmistress, she said. You must have knocked it over without knowing it. That sort of thing is easy to do.
I am fed up with you useless bunch of midgets, roared the Trunchbull. I refuse to waste any more of my precious time here. And with that, she marched out of the classroom, slamming the door behind her. In the stunned silence that followed, Miss Honey walked up to the front of the class and stood behind her table.
Phew, she said. I think we've had enough school for one day, don't you? The class is dismissed. You may all go out in the playground and wait for your parents to come and take you home. That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more read-alongs. Until next time, bye!